I just skimmed through it.
Hey there, doing Instagram Live. Happy for you guys to join. Hey, can you help me find the Mastery book? I think I was reading it out there.
Okay.
Yeah. How's everybody doing? Just starting right now, and I hope everything has been going well on another day of quarantine. I think the good thing is that we're all seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. So remember, even just every day has been like a week in terms of news cycle, media cycle, and what I'll even call the fear cycle. Like sometimes I would think 2 weeks ago, man, this is great. Like the market's up, looks like data's going the way that I've been predicting. And then at night, suddenly there would be a press conference. Oh no, complete lockdown. This is gonna last another 18 months. And so there was all this uncertainty. And I think the government and both Republicans and Democrats need to know that in community, and they know this, I think, but I think this has been such a confusing time. When you communicate with somebody, certainty breeds, happiness and familiarity, and people will like you more if you present certainty. If you present uncertainty, it creates fear and anxiety and stress and depression. And so even when I talk to my daughters or kids, I always want to say things to be certain, like, yes, I will take care of this expense for you. Or I never say, we'll see, it depends on blah, blah, blah. Like, kids, most of all, don't like uncertainty, because they feel very powerless. But what's happened in this pandemic and this crisis, and the crisis I'll refer to as not just the pandemic, but the quarantine and the lockdown, what's happened is that we have felt powerless. Like we're not allowed to go outside, and we don't know why. We don't understand it. We don't understand the science of the virus. We don't understand the economic damage being caused. So there's all these things that are uncertain, and we feel powerless because we're told, don't go to work. But I want to go to work. Don't go. You're not allowed. So again, what happens is when you feel powerless, you revert to the fear and the insecurities you felt when you were 6 years old, when you were 7 years old. Why do you think two intelligent, educated adults would be fighting on the floor of Trader Joe's over a roll of toilet paper? Like that was in the news just 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, is that people were fighting over toilet paper. And it's insane, it's insanity. So certainty is very important, but now we're starting to feel that certainty. And again, this is a repeat from yesterday, but what are we certain about? Now, as we've been saying from day one on this IG Live, we do know that this pandemic is coming to an end. We do know that it's probably peaked in New York City. It's certainly peaked in Spain and Italy. Northern Europe is going back to work. China is back at work. South Korea, Singapore, all these Asian countries are back to work. So we do know that, there's a chance for economic normalcy. Here's another thing we're certain about. We know that the stimulus happened. Previously, 2 weeks ago, we didn't know if the stimulus package was going to happen. So everyone who lost their job was more afraid than they are now. They might still be afraid, but they're less afraid because there's some certainty. So in terms of the virus and in terms of economic health, it's not like things are great. Like it's not like we're dancing in the street. But feel how you feel now compared to 2 weeks ago. And it's only because your lifestyle has not changed yet. But now the only thing that's changed is we have more certainty in our lives. So someone says Singapore is closed. Is that really true? I don't think Singapore ever closed. They never had a complete lockdown. And everybody always says, I don't believe anything China says. That's true in the beginning. It is not true right now, because right now we're there. The American government is in Wuhan. We're in China. Apple is in China. They've reopened all the stores. So Tim Cook, the Apple CEO, he has no reason to open up the 42 little stores they have in China unless he felt it would be safe. So Americans are there now. I do not believe a single thing from China from the beginning, but right now on a daily basis, I believe China more than I believe the US data for that matter. Here's something that Dr. Birx, who's always in the press conferences, here's something she said just yesterday or the day before, that she said basically every death of someone who has COVID-19 is listed as a COVID death. That's ridiculous. What if you had pneumonia and then on top of it you got coronavirus and you're 90 years old and then you died? Is that a coronavirus death? Is it a pneumonia death? Is it an old age death? Like, it's ridiculous to list everything as a coronavirus death. Just like it's ridiculous for these mathematical models to say, oh, and then for the government to repeat these models, oh, there's going to be 240,000 deaths in the U.S. Are you kidding me? There's something like 60,000 deaths worldwide right now, and the virus is close to peaking, which means it's going to start to stabilize and then go down to nothing. There's only, I don't know how many deaths are in the U.S., but there's certainly a infinitesimally small amount compared to 240,000 deaths, and they say that's what's going to happen in just the U.S. That's impossible. Now, Andrew Cuomo said that, of course, there's going to be a second wave, maybe a third wave. Lots of viruses and pandemics have second and third waves. That's true, but often they're weaker, but we don't know. The other thing is, though, there's starting to be a lot of evidence of what drugs and supplements you can take to not necessarily cure coronavirus, but to reduce the symptoms. So there's going to be much more research done on that over the next 3 or 4 months. The science is so much faster than it's ever been in any other pandemic. So we do have certainty. I feel comfortable knowing that if there's a second wave of this next November, that we'll know the supplements to take to better buffer our immune system. I mean, just look at Africa right now. I don't want to argue about hydroxychloroquine. Like a few weeks ago, I mentioned hydroxychloroquine. And by the way, I don't mention anything medical unless a specialist in the virus epidemiology industry tells me, a doctor tells me. But I mentioned hydroxychloroquine. Someone on the IG Live said, oh, it doesn't work. And he was saying it for just political reasons. Like, I didn't even know that the president was recommending it. Like, I don't care if the president recommends it. I care if doctors do. But again, 2 days ago, a friend of mine told me an ER doctor is telling people not to go to the hospital. He's prescribing hydroxychloroquine. There was a poll taken, 60% of private physicians are recommending hydroxychloroquine to their patients who have coronavirus. So I don't know if that one works, but maybe it does. Maybe quinine, which is kind of the original herbal drug that chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine are based on, a lot of people are saying quinine might be a good preventative. I don't know, ask your doctor. But you have to ask yourself, hydroxychloroquine is used against, so someone says you die from heart complications. Trust me, hydroxychloroquine has been used since the 1940s. A billion people in Africa have used it and still use it to avoid Africa. Yes, if you have heart problems, don't take hydroxychloroquine. Go to a doctor. I'm not recommending take it. Go to a doctor and take it. And go to a doctor and see what's right for you after they check your heart. But you have to wonder, why are there very relatively few cases in Africa compared to the US? It's because Africa is constantly taking this drug or its derivatives to avoid malaria, and now there's evidence that this reduces the symptoms of coronavirus. So maybe they had it in Africa, but they're all asymptomatic because they've been taking quinine or chloroquine or hydroxychloroquine. So we don't know. And someone asked the question, a very good question, why can't people decide to either take it or not? Assess your own risk. I agree with that. Why do we always need the government to tell us what we can take and what we can't take? And I always ask this question. Let's say you're 80 years old and you're on a ventilator and your children want the doctor to give you XYZ drug that there's a huge amount of evidence that might work, and the doctor says, no, I can't. It's not FDA approved. Who cares? The guy's going to die. Give him the drug. Give him whatever he wants. Heroin, give him heroin. Give him whatever he wants right now. He's about to die. At some point, you should be allowed to do whatever you want to do except murder someone if you're about to die. Like, why do I have to obey the FDA's rulings if I'm 15 minutes away from death? So, saying everything is fine from a sofa while people are dying like flies just across the street, not so smart. So, okay, I'm not saying everything is fine. I'm saying there's more certainty. So, yes, people are dying every day. I have never once said everything is fine. In fact, I think both the economic damage is so, I don't want to say it's fine. We'll get back to normal at some point, and we're going to get back to normal in part because of the stimulus package, and there's some indications that the government wants to reopen things within a week, which would be great. But in terms of the virus, I think things are fine in terms of there's no more exponential growth, at least in the United States, or at least it's ending in the United States. And in the New York City, Spain, Italy, New York City, where most of the deaths are in the United States, New York City, the exponential growth is over. We're seeing declining hospitalizations every day. So it's not that everything's fine. People are still going to the hospital. But now we have to start looking at it in the context of every other disease and every other illness. This is going to turn out to be weaker than the flu, both in terms of contagion and in terms of death rate. So we need to start coming up with where should we have changed policy? How can we change policy now so that the economic damage is relieved? I mean, another 6 million people filed for unemployment today. So, and I'll get to that in a second, what those numbers really mean. But, there's something, I mentioned this yesterday, something called collateral fatalities. So somebody who has cancer has not been able to get cancer treatments in many cases because the cancer wards were cleared out for coronavirus patients that never showed up. 32 states have less than 85 deaths. When that represents 200 million people with less than 85 deaths per state, we've missed out on saving maybe hundreds of thousands of lives from other things. So we just have to, and this is good for life in general. Sometimes you focus on one problem and it kind of gives you tunnel vision about all the other problems in your life. Like you might think, oh my gosh, I have no money, or I just got this letter from the IRS. I have to think about it constantly, when you also have to think about, okay, I've got to love my kids and take care of my kids. I've got to love my spouse and spend time with my spouse. I've got to still pursue my interests. I've got to, you can't just take any one thing and that's the only thing you do and think about. And a country is the same way. You can't just take coronavirus and that suddenly shut down everything else and this is the only thing we think about. And very important that the next time we have a situation like this, I kind of, there's no sense blaming anyone. I think we need to take a step back and not, once this is over, and it will be, and now we're having some light at the end of that tunnel, we see that it's going to be over. Probably in New York State, it'll be over by the end of April. Probably for the US, it'll be over by the end of May. And yes, there'll be a second wave, there'll be another season, whatever. We'll have better medical knowledge by then to have faster cures. We'll know what to do. But I hope at the end of this, and this applies to everything in life, even individually, don't just say, oh, I'm a hero, I did it right. Or don't just say, oh, I did it wrong, whatever. Take a step back, and the way you learn is you take a step back and you look at what you did and you think about it from all angles. And you ask every question, even ridiculous questions. Here's a ridiculous question. Was this even an epidemic? Was it a pandemic? Clearly it was. It was an epidemic. But then you can start asking, do lockdowns work? Okay, does social distance, there's lockdowns on one side and there's herd immunity and no lockdown on the other side. Well, where's the line in the middle where it works? There's always a line in the middle where it works. We don't need to do a complete economic shutdown. Herd immunity is not good either. We don't even do herd immunity in flu season. If I have the flu, I stay home. If someone has the flu, you stay distant from them. So we do some kind of social distancing even with other diseases. So where's the middle point where we could do the appropriate amount of social distancing, taking care of ourselves, the right supplements, where we have a similar amount of effect from the disease, or maybe less, but we don't have any economic damage. Now we see the economic damage. 20 million people are unemployed, probably more. I'll get to that in a second. It's not as bad as people think. And so many industries have turned upside down. The restaurant industry may be dead. Movie theaters may be dead. Travel, all the airlines are going to go bankrupt. Car companies, they're going to have problems. They'll probably need to be bailed out. College is going to completely turn upside down. I've been saying it for 15 years, but now it's this is what the coronavirus is doing in every industry is accelerating what we already knew. So college people were already suspicious of, but now it's pretty clear college is mostly a scam. Not 100% a scam, but mostly a scam. There's no reason some random college, I'll just pick random, Quinnipiac College, which nobody's ever heard of. There's no reason that college should charge the same amount for tuition as Harvard, and that the head of Quinnipiac should make $3 million a year income. That's ridiculous. So all these things, the tide has come in and we're seeing everyone who was standing in the water naked. So that's going to change society. The new normal here is going to be a new society. And people say health first. I'm not sure what you mean by that, but it doesn't mean coronavirus first. Am I correct? Because many more people have died from other diseases that couldn't be treated because they didn't go to the hospital, because the hospital was filled up with coronavirus patients. So all these people who are in danger of heart attacks or strokes or cancer or other diseases, they simply could not go to the hospital and get treated. And there might have been, we focused a little too much on this disease and didn't think about other health issues in society. And I think, and now we didn't focus on the economic issues. So what are the economic issues? Well, when everybody stays home, guess what? Divorce rates are going to go up huge. I would say divorce rates spike by about 30% over the next year. Divorce rates are going to go up. Child abuse cases have gone way up. Domestic abuse has gone way up. Drug addiction has gone way up. In addition to, people are just sad and scared. I get messages every day. I'm encouraging people to send me GoFundMe links for their businesses if all the employees are out of work and they need help. There's so many employees who are good, smart people who were just starting out in their careers, and nobody's ever experienced this before. They're unemployed. It's not their fault, and they're struggling. People only had, on average, $400 cash in the bank. How are they going to buy food? Well, I helped out at a food line at a homeless shelter, and there's so many people were lined up to get a week's worth of food, not just homeless people, but many people. And people are hungry right now. So, again, everyone is saying, oh, you can't choose between the stock market and people's lives. They use that. People are dying. You don't care about people dying. Well, people are dying from other things than coronavirus. And by the way, it just turned out, it didn't kill, guess what? It didn't kill 10 million people in the U.S. Don't forget, the initial report said it was going to kill 10 million people in the U.S. And I kept looking at the deaths worldwide. At the time, it was about 4,000. And I'm like, how are they going to add up to 10 million deaths in the U.S.? And of course, there's no 10 million deaths in the U.S. In fact, the states that did no social distancing have the fewest cases. So we don't even know properly, we don't know scientifically the link between social distancing and deaths. I'm not saying social distancing is bad. I'm saying we just don't know. And so, so you make a good point, Tina. You make a good point that a lot of the couples that are getting divorced now probably shouldn't have been together anyway. You're right. This coronavirus had a way of accelerating things personally. It sort of brought out the best in us and the worst in us. If you were prone to being an angry person, you probably got a lot angrier during this period. If you were prone to be a generous person or a calm person, you probably were a source of hope and solace for many people during this period. So this virus probably brought out the best and the worst in us, but now we can start to move on. Now is a chance to make sure it brings out the best in us. The people who will be the most successful coming out of this horrible situation, and I don't mean the virus, I mean the lockdown, the isolation, the quarantine, the economic damage. I'm just seeing some of these points. Yeah, the people who are going to come out the best from this are the people who learned through this to deal with uncertainty. And by the way, none of us are great at dealing with uncertainty. It's programmed in our brains to not like uncertainty. The brain hates uncertainty. We evolved that way. Our ancestors who survived because they knew how to deal with uncertainty, but they also hated it. And I hated it too. There's been times when I've been stressed or when I've been angry. Like a few weeks ago, I was angry and I was thinking, why, when there's so much evidence that some states are not being affected as others, why are they shutting down the economy in those states and forcing millions of people to go out of work or lose revenues? Like a state like Ohio has 200 cases. Why shut down the economy for a state with 8 million people for 200 cases. It doesn't make any sense. And they didn't really practice social distancing. They just closed all the laundromats. Why did they do that? So I think this is going to be, and so I was getting angry. I was writing letters to the government. I was doing the stupidest thing of all, which is arguing with people on Twitter who weren't making any sense. None of that was helping me as a person. What did help me was looking at the data, understanding for myself, contacting specialists and hearing straight from the specialists and the experts, even contacting people high up in the government. I knew some people who were extremely high up who appear at some of those press conferences, and finding out like what is the thinking internally. And it was very interesting. It was very nuanced. Like there's all these battles between healthcare officials and non-healthcare officials, between Democrats and Republicans, between economists and lifetime politicians. So there's a lot of stuff, and I've been trying to take what I've learned from talking to doctors and economists and the government officials and share them with you guys. And fortunately, all of this has helped me kind of have an accurate view. If you remember from the first Instagram Live, I'm saying the exact same things I'm saying now in terms of when this will be over, when the peak is, what drugs or supplements might be interesting to look at, what the economic concerns are. So now let's just talk a little bit about the unemployment numbers, and then I'm also going to talk about what you should be doing right now in terms of networking, because now is an excellent time to bring email, text, or phone networking. So, and this will help for any new business ideas you have. So, I haven't even looked at the unemployment numbers. I just saw a headline. There's 6.6 million that filed for unemployed. Last week was 10 million. The week before was 3.3 million. You add it up, that's whatever it is, that's almost 20 million people, maybe more than 20 million people unemployed. That's horrible. But we've got to look at it in context. Tomorrow morning, the headlines are going to be 20 million people unemployed. So let me just tell you how to accurately look at this. And then I'll answer some other questions, and Jay's been keeping track of the questions. So it's a horrible thing, the number of unemployed. But we don't want to compare apples for oranges. So if the financial crisis had, 3 million people unemployed, 4 million people unemployed, it's apples versus oranges now. So right now, what's different? Well, the stimulus package itself changed the rules about what it means to be unemployed. By the way, when you see the newspaper headlines tomorrow, not a single one of them will mention this. So they'll just want to scare you. 20 million people unemployed, boom, boom, worse since the Great Depression, boom, boom, boom. But let's just look at it in context. Again, the rules have changed. What's changed? Part-time workers can file for unemployment. The self-employed can file for unemployment. That's a major change. So that's 6 million, not quite 6 million, it's millions less. Furloughed employees, meaning employees who are going to be rehired as soon as the economy reopens. These people have applied for unemployed. So throw in millions more. We don't really know how many people are unemployed in the traditional sense. We just know how many people are unemployed according to the new rules that were just passed a couple of weeks ago. So again, don't just look at the headline. It's important to understand the data. Always ask, if you think you have an opinion, but you don't know all the data, that's fine. Just ask yourself, do I know all the data? Be willing to listen to another point of view. Be willing to not be partisan and say, 20 million unemployed. This is so-and-so's fault. This is Pelosi's fault. This is Trump's fault. It's nobody's fault. The rules have changed. But here's another important thing about unemployment. They did two things that are very interesting in the stimulus package. They raised the amount of money you get per week. So in New York City, the average person is going to make $1,100 per week instead of $300. That's a huge difference. So an unemployed worker is going to oddly make more than the average school teacher. So that's an important difference. I'm not saying it's good to be unemployed, but once this unemployment insurance kicks in, it's not the worst thing either, depending on what your job was, of course. If you were a Wall Street banker, now you're making $1,100 a week, I don't know. But again, people who are unemployed, they might even want to stay unemployed. The other thing they did is they changed the amount of time you can get unemployment. They changed it to 39 weeks, and there's possible extensions to that. So I don't know what it was before. It was either 26 weeks or something like that. But that's a big difference. It means you can get unemployment for 10 months. So very important difference between now and prior situations. So, someone says, I thought the money you get from unemployment was $600 a week. That's true. It's $600 added to what you would have gotten prior. So in New York, if you would have gotten $500 a week prior, now you're going to get $600 more, so $1,100 a week. So unemployment insurance is a real alternative now for people, more than ever was before. Another thing that's happening is small businesses can get hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars in loans. Believe me, every small business I see up and down the street, they're all applying for millions of dollars of loans. If they get those loans, A, they might have an easier time reopening and hiring people, or B, they'll simply spend the money and that money will go into the economy. So there's going to be an enormous amount of money just shoved into the economy. Now, where that will go remains to be seen. There's going to be a new normal. It's impossible to predict, but it will bring the economy back sooner rather than later. It's really important to know that. And again, don't watch the headlines. If these two headlines are the evil headlines, coronavirus deaths greater than ever, that's a useless headline. Another useless headline, 20 million people unemployed. Useless headline. Don't even look at the news. The news is useless. They're desperate to take your dollars. So find accurate sources of information and data, and I'll try to find that as well and share that with you. And then act accordingly. Don't get angry. Don't say, oh, this is messed up. Like, there's usually things are not as bad as the media is telling you. That's the one thing you have to remember. So it's very important. The media has an agenda. The media is lying to you. What's their agenda? They always say, oh, we're correct. Everything else is fake news. That is BS. The traditional media is the biggest form of fake news because they're the ones with the most at stake. Newspapers were going out of business. This is their lifeline. They're like, please let us have a worldwide disaster so we could keep people listening to the news. Whereas citizen journalism, which I find to be a lot more accurate now than, if you pick and choose, but I find that citizen journalism is not only an opportunity for everybody here, but more accurate than mainstream news, because mainstream news is so partisan and is so eager to scare you. So, and the other thing is, what are the agendas of the politicians? Well, it's obvious: to get elected or to get reelected. So on the one hand, everybody's scared. So on the one hand, the Republicans are scared because they just shut down the economy and there's all these disasters and everyone's blaming. No Western country in the world was prepared, but everyone's blaming. Oh, should we blame Cuomo? Should we blame Trump? Forget the blame. Stop blaming. On the one hand, we have a president who's scared about what the right decision should be, and sure, you could blame him, but good decisions were made and bad decisions were made. I think the economic shutdown was a very bad decision. Others will disagree. And on the other side, you have, this is the first time in history, it's a historic moment, you have the first time in history, and it's sad, you have an elderly, senile patient being the nominee for a party. Now, I've been a Democrat all my life, but you have to ask the question, where does partisanship end and where does good common sense begin? So again, I'm not saying don't elect someone, don't vote for somebody. I'm apolitical. I'm actually political on a local level. I'm very much a Democrat on a local level, but on a presidential level, I don't even know what the president does that's worthwhile to anybody. But so I have a candidate that I support for mayor of New York City, for instance, but I don't let partisanship enter into my decisions. I let common sense enter my decisions. Now, as we get out of this, it's good and it's important to start developing good skills. First off, I'm going to check to see, Jay, have you, I'm hoping Jay is on here. Jay, have you sent me the questions yet? Because I don't see them. Where are the questions? Usually you send me a file with the questions and I'm not seeing it, Jay. All right, I don't see it. Jay, hopefully you send me the questions or I'll start. Oh, did you send me, Jay? You send me the link? Send me the link, because I don't have the file open. In any case, Jay sent them. All right, Jay, send me the link. But I do want to talk about, I just had a podcast with Jordan Harbinger, great podcaster. He has his own podcast, The Jordan Harbinger Show, gets millions of downloads a month. And we were brainstorming about what he calls 6-minute networking. And I thought his techniques were so smart, I wanted to share them with you. Oh wait, Jay sent me the questions, so I'll respond to some questions first. What about boutique gyms? Sadly, I think boutique gyms are out of business because day one, nobody wants to go down and use equipment that everyone else has touched. Again, I don't think you're going to get a coronavirus from using gym equipment, but I do think boutique gyms are going to have a hard time. So instead, I want everything I say, I want to have something constructive to say. So let's brainstorm a little bit for the benefit of those people out there who have boutique gyms. I do think if people valued your services in a boutique gym, maybe you can do online classes, and then maybe you have a premium set up for premium classes or one-on-one classes online. So you could do a workout with Zoom, or you can do, sometimes you really need the help of a personal trainer or someone in a class. But let's say in a big class that doesn't get a lot of personal attention, I think Zoom classes or video classes will be important. And maybe there's other things that are important, like teaching, some aspects of, physiology, like why different exercises are important for different reasons. All these things that we never really learn in gym class. Like yoga is a great example. Yoga is a good workout if it's done exactly correct. But I find there are many kinds of yoga, and some yoga teachers actually have no clue about what they're doing. So in addition to preaching about exercises that could be harmful to the body if not done correctly, they don't really know what's going on physiologically. So kind of force trainers and gym instructors or gym owners to get really clear on the physiology of what's happening. Why are certain yoga exercises popular? What is the benefits of spinning in a spin class? Like what's happening physiologically and so on. So I think boutique gyms should go a little deeper. We'll move online and so on. Do you have a process for dealing with uncertainty from a practical standpoint? Such a great question, because I think it's really important that we all take a step back and look at these past few weeks and past few months and ask us, what actions did I take? What decisions did I make? What things did I do that were not useful, and what were useful to, and of course you look at concentric circles around you. What was useful to me? What was useful to my family? What was useful to my friends, my coworkers, to society? And you can start to make decisions. Well, okay, when I was angry at my spouse, that wasn't useful. When I yelled at my kids, that wasn't useful. But when I got 8 hours of sleep and then woke up and wrote a chapter in a book or networked with my colleagues, that was useful. So the main thing with dealing with uncertainty, we're always going to have periods of uncertainty like this. And the key is take every action and take as many thoughts as possible and label them: useful, not useful. So if I start feeling anxious about taxes, how am I going to pay my taxes? I didn't get my bonus because the job closed. How am I going to do taxes? Okay, the first 1 second of that was useful because it's important to ask how you're going to pay something. But then the anxiety after that was not useful. Instead, you can call the accountant, you can call the IRS, work out a payment plan. You can do all sorts of things that are useful instead of feeling anxious about it. And so, again, and you don't have to do this all day long. Sometimes, if you feel yourself getting extra anxious, just stop yourself and ask, is this useful? Or can I switch my thinking and actions to something more useful? Or just randomly during the day, have your alarm go off, 2 p.m. Am I thinking about things that are useful or not useful? Am I doing things that are useful or not useful? This is how you deal with uncertainty. So for instance, if I get on Twitter and I'm arguing with someone about, no, the data shows there's going to be a peak by April 15th, and some random anonymous person, and by the way, they're always anonymous, some random anonymous person says, you're an idiot, there's no proof for that. I don't need to respond. That's not useful. better for me to go and spend time with my kids, or better for me to go and write an article for my readers, or better for me to do an IG live for people who are, we're going to have a conversation. So again, always thinking as much as possible, labeling useful, not useful, useful, not useful. Uncertainty is always going to exist. And your first impulse with anxiety is to feel stress. With uncertainty is to feel stress and anxiety. But then you take a step back and you figure out useful, not useful. Just got a letter from the IRS. Not useful is not sleeping all night because of it. Useful is, okay, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to make some calls. I'm going to work out some deals. I'm going to go down to the bank, see if I could borrow some money, see if I can mortgage, see if I could borrow from my business, see if I can work out a payment plan, whatever. That's useful. With the coronavirus, if you find yourself sweating, am I going to get it? Do I have it? Okay, just sleep 8 hours, take the supplements you need, make sure your lungs are healthy, however you do that, however your doctor suggests doing that, that's useful. Worrying about it all the time is not useful. Will 100 million people die? You asking that question over in your head, not useful. Looking at the data and seeing, oh no, that would be impossible. Even in January, you could have seen that's impossible. I think it was early February, Harvard came out with a report that said up to 140 million people worldwide are going to die. 140 million. That came from Harvard. Not useful, because that was so clearly not true. People in their ivory towers with their PhDs, everyone's saying, I'm going to leave this for the experts. The experts don't know anything. They've just got their PhDs by sitting in a room for 7 straight years, doing nothing but writing a PhD thesis no one's ever going to read. So the experts are not who you think. What really comes out of a situation like this is you realize who are the experts and who should we never pay attention to again. Maybe don't ever pay attention to me again. But so far, we've all been kind of dead on with everything we've been saying. And I feel a lot of the people who've had partisan opinions have been kind of in the not useful category. Should we worry about hyperinflation? I asked that yesterday. It's a great question. I use as an example, when there's hyperinflation, it's because a country prints up too much money. And so let's say everybody in the United States got $1 million. That would be hyperinflation, because now if I was Apple Computer, I would just say, okay, well, the iPhone now costs $2 million. So that's hyperinflation. And countries have done that. Germany did it in the 1920s. Zimbabwe did it. Look at this bill. This is from Zimbabwe. It's a $100 billion bill. And you needed to bring a wheelbarrow of these to the supermarket in order to buy a loaf of bread. That is hyperinflation. And so it's a good question. We are printing some money right now. And will the United States suffer hyperinflation? So I'm kind of dividing this. I've given you, and I hope you appreciate it, economic lesson number 1 was what do the unemployment numbers mean right now? And it's a little bit different than the headlines will suggest tomorrow. And it's a little bit different than what they mean in the past. Hyperinflation occurs when you print up a lot of money and demand is so high that people instantly start spending all the money. But right now, demand is really low. I've probably had the least amount in monthly expenses that I've had in 10 years this month. So demand is low. And also, inflation happens when people are fully employed. So when a company is fully employed and they need more workers, they have to pay more money to the new workers. And so that means they have to raise the prices on their goods to pay for the more expensive employees. So that's when inflation and then hyperinflation increase. But right now we have huge unemployment, we have huge lack of demand, and it's going to be a while before there's inflation. Right now, by the way, if you actually, nobody will say this, and it's funny that they have not said this in a single newspaper. Right now, we are experiencing, my guess is about 20% deflation. The only 2 times in U.S. history that we've experienced deflation, or at least in the past 150 years, the only 2 times was in early 2009, there was deflation because of the financial crisis. And then in the Great Depression, there was deflation because there was no demand. Now, in the Great Depression, just giving you a little history of economics lesson. So before you start talking about economics, you need to know the history of all these situations. I see on CNBC or all these channels so many people talking about money, and they don't know the history of money. They don't know anything. So you got to look at the Great Depression. Why was there deflation? There was a specific reason there was deflation. It's not only because the stock market crashed, but right after the stock market crashed, Herbert Hoover and his Secretary of Treasury, Andrew Mellon, they actually increased interest rates, which closes down the economy in an artificial way. They increased interest rates because they were so afraid of speculation in the stock market that they wanted a depression to calm people down from speculation. So Andrew Mellon even said, "Let the poor people die." He had a quote something like that. So we are doing the exact opposite. We are decreasing interest rates, and the Fed is even doing more. The Federal Reserve is buying not only treasury bills, which is how they decrease interest rates, but they're buying mortgage bonds, municipal bonds. They're even buying these loans that the banks are giving to small businesses. So this way the banks can constantly recycle those loans and loan more money. So the Federal Reserve is acting like a very aggressive bank with infinite money, and they're able to do that because there's deflation right now, but they're stimulating the economy, which is the opposite of what they did in the Great Depression. And by the way, why did they do that in 2009? We're doing the same thing we did in 2009, but 10 times as big. So after 2009, don't forget, there was an 11-year stock market boom that only ended because of coronavirus. So it worked in 2009. The question is, are we doing too much now? So I hope the Federal Reserve is planning how to pull things back if the economy starts to heat up. But for the moment, it worked in 2009. It's going to work at least in the first year now. And then hopefully they can pull things down if things go up too fast. But I do expect the stock market easily, I do not have a single doubt, the Dow Jones will double from wherever it is today. It's going to double by the end of 2021, just because if you have $6 trillion being put into the stock market and the stock market itself is $6 trillion, well, that's a double. So that's what's happening in the economy and in the market. And I think we need to worry about inflation in 2022, 2023. Hopefully they pull things back then, but we'll see. But for now, you need to position yourself so that you can take advantage of the fact that there's an extra $6 trillion in the economy. If you don't take advantage of that, you might fall behind. So we shouldn't worry about hyperinflation yet. In all this stimulus, is it going to hurt down the road? Yes, I just answered that, but not initially. Keep an eye out in 2022, 2023. There's going to have to be actions taken so that it does not hurt the economy 3 years out. Again, right now, we're experiencing deflation. How many emails have you gotten in the past day where it's your favorite store and they say 20% off, 30% off, 30% off a new Peloton spin cycle or whatever it is? That's not a sale. That's not a Christmas sale. That's a polite way of them saying, hey, we're in a deflationary era and this is what's happening. So every time someone offers you a discount, that means more and more deflation. Hopefully we get past that with the stimulus. So let's see the other questions. At what point does the Fed run out of money? Great question. So the Fed and the U.S. government in general makes money in three ways. One is they make money from taxes. So when the economy is great, tax revenues are higher and the U.S. government makes more money. So the better the economy is, the more money the government makes and the more stimulus they can do. So anybody who says, screw the companies, we've got to tax the companies even more, that's fine, but there's a balance. Just like with economic shutdown versus no economic shutdown, there's got to be a balance, because the economy and companies and taxes is what pays for healthcare, is what pays for bridges, is what pays for the post office, which is about to go out of business. So there's a balance between the economy going up, taxes going up. They're inversely correlated, so you got to be careful. So that's one way. Taxes is one way the Fed makes money. The other way is by borrowing money. So the U.S. government borrows money. So for instance, we borrow money from China. China has lent the United States $2 trillion. So we borrow money from countries. Now, the good thing about interest rates being very low is if countries still want to borrow or lend us money, that's a good sign that the US dollar is strong. So this is the third economic lesson of the day. If interest rates are low for a country, then you should borrow as much as possible. So I think the Federal Reserve should be even more aggressive about borrowing right now, because here's what the US government should do. The US government should borrow money, and here's the terms. We'll pay you back 100 years from now. Typically the US government does it in 10 or 30 years. We'll pay you back 100 years from now, and we're going to pay 0.1 or 0% interest. You would be surprised. Countries will still lend to us because the US dollar is the safest. So if you're a wealthy person in Iran or even in China and you want to convert your money to dollars somehow, you will lend the US government money at those terms. 100 years loans at 0% interest. So that's how powerful the US dollar is. Now, it won't always be that powerful, but as long as it is that powerful, the US government should borrow as much money as possible. That's why when people worry about the US debt, that's the wrong headline to worry about once again. You have to ask, what are the interest rate payments? Turns out the US has very low interest payments versus the income of the US. So that's what you have. That's the ratio. Income over interest payments is the ratio you should look at, not the size of the debt. This is economics lesson number 3. I'm sorry I'm giving so many economics lessons, but it's amazing to me how many journalists and even people going on news shows talking about this, they don't know the slightly deeper details, which you now know, fortunately. So the third way the Federal Reserve gets money is they print it out of thin air. So for instance, let's say a bank says to the Federal Reserve, hey, Federal Reserve, can you help me out? A lot of people are asking me for money because they're scared and we don't have enough cash in the bank. The Federal Reserve will hit a button and say, oh, we just made up, here's $100 billion, knock yourself out. But that's, when they print money like that, that's usually a one-day loan that the bank has to return. And so we saw this in 2009. The Federal Reserve printed up trillions of dollars of money. They got the money back and they made money on it. So again, economics lesson number 3, it's not just about printing money, it's about what's the deal after you print the money. Am I going to get that money back? For instance, the Federal Reserve took ownership of 20% of the top 20 banks in the United States in 2009. They're going to do something similar now, is my guess. They made money on that because the bank's value soared, and then the US government sold those stakes. So the US government made an enormous amount of money in 2009 because the Fed printed money for free. So those are the 3 ways the US government makes money. Now, if other countries did that, it wouldn't have the same positive effects, and the US always has to be worried, can we fall into the danger zone? So there has to be constant checking. Is there too much inflation? The danger zone is inflation. So we always have to check, is there too much inflation? But right now, there's deflation. If you were to really measure a basket of products and see if there's inflation or deflation, my guess is we're in 10 to 20% deflation now, the worst deflationary period in US history. So someone just said, I was wrong about Bitcoin. I wasn't. I was on CNBC in September 2017. It's the last time I went on CNBC to make a prediction about Bitcoin. At the time, I said Bitcoin was at 3,500. I said Bitcoin is going to go way up from here. I was wrong about the price. I said Bitcoin's going to eventually reach 1 million. It has not reached 1 million yet, but Bitcoin's around 7,000 now. So Bitcoin's up 100% from 2017, which is better than the stock market, better than gold, better than any other asset class. So all these people who keep saying I was wrong about Bitcoin, I was not wrong. Anybody who bought when I recommended it is a happy camper now. But I will say, I have regrets. I regret my ads on Bitcoin. All of those, I didn't make the ads, but the buck stops here. I should have been more forceful about saying I don't like that. All those ads that said eccentric crypto genius, blah, blah, blah. I didn't like those ads, but I felt a lot of people were making mistakes in how they were investing in Bitcoin. I wanted to correct those mistakes, and people, I thought that if I do the most aggressive ads, then that way people will listen to me instead of what I thought were scams that were out there. But I regret the ads now. It hurt my reputation, and I still have people saying I was wrong, and that's a painful topic for me. But that I do think my ads were too aggressive. I wish there was a way. There's a philosopher, Alain de Botton, who says even the good guys have to have Machiavellian tactics. Because if I was the only person with really nice ads and I said, please listen to me, please, please, and everyone else is saying, you could do this with Bitcoin, they're going to win, but I thought they were scams. So I had to compete with them. So everybody, once one person uses Machiavellian techniques, everyone has to if you want to reach the eyeballs of people. So I don't know. Again, I probably could have done something more in the middle. I took the most aggressive choice, and I was the most successful advertiser on the whole internet during that period. But I regret it somewhat, although whatever. So yes, Alain de Botton, very good guy, very smart guy. Other questions? How does the music artist suffer with lack of performance, and what's the remedy? Great question, because music artists have been making a lot of money from concerts. Same with stand-up comedians, by the way. You make money when you go from city to city and sell out stadiums. But very few music artists have the audience to sell out a stadium like Madison Square Garden. But many artists make a living from, performing in local theaters or clubs or music clubs or nightclubs. So we're not talking about the stadium artists, but we're talking about the average artist, creator, musician, comedian, whatever, who makes a living from going to clubs. Well, there's other ways to do it now. First off, do better licensing deals with companies like Spotify. That's going to happen. Do more online content, do more podcasts, do more online shows. There's going to be new outlets online. Like I talk to, so I own a comedy club. I am a stand-up comedian, and I talk to comedians every single day. What are you doing? There's no more stand-up. And is there going to be stand-up when we get out of this? And I tell people, you're a funny person. Go on a podcast or start a podcast. Make your audience laugh. Make your guests laugh. And use your skills that you've developed over stand-up comedy to bring humor and entertainment whilst being informative. And, you're going to have to change your model. It might not be the case that you can get up on stage as much, but you can always start a podcast or something like that. Do I think things will get back to normal once vaccines are out? I actually don't think there's going to be a vaccine in the traditional sense, but I think there's over 30 FDA trials happening right now for cures or drugs that will alleviate the symptoms. I think nobody will give a shit about this virus once any of those trials are successful. Who knows? If I was a betting person, I would bet that hydroxychloroquine will be proven to alleviate symptoms. And once it's common and everybody has access to it. By the way, don't forget, India tried to prevent us from getting 1 billion pills of hydroxychloroquine. Why would they do that? Because they know it works. So again, I'm not trusting that. Ask your doctor, and there's many other trials going on. But what's going to happen pretty quickly is we're going to have cures, whether there are vaccines or not. We're going to have cures that help the symptoms, and then we're not going to worry about this virus anymore. And, we don't have a vaccine for the common cold, but we have lots of drugs that alleviate symptoms. The common cold is a type of coronavirus. The same thing's going to happen here. So here's a question. What if businesses don't pay back the loans that the SBA is going to give them? I kind of think that's going to happen. That's why the Federal Reserve is buying those loans right now from banks. Because I think most small businesses are going to default on these loans, and the money is just going to enter into the economy and not come back to the government. So I think the Federal Reserve is anticipating that already. They announced today that they're going to be buying some of those loans back, because I know plenty of people already who are going to take out small business loans and not pay them back. And I don't blame them, because why take those loans and reopen your restaurant just to declare bankruptcy 3 months from now? Take the money, start a new business, and maybe you pay those loans 10 years back, maybe you don't. I don't know. What will happen to the credit scoring system? The credit scoring system is a scam. I have never had, in my entire life, I have never had a credit card. Okay, not once. I only have had debit cards. I'm 52. Since I was 18, I have never once had or used a credit card. So when I rent an apartment, people always check my credit, and it's weird. They're like, "What is wrong with you? You don't have a credit history. You've never had a credit card." And I say, "Yeah, I don't like to get into debt like the average person does." And they're like, "But that's weird." And they actually charge me more rent, or they insist on me putting 3 or 4 months down in advance for deposit, just because I've never been in debt before. So it's always weird. So I think the credit scoring system is a scam. There's a lot of things that are scams. Credit scoring system is a scam. Colleges are a scam because online learning is going to be better. It doesn't cost you 4 years and $300,000 to get a degree. So credit scoring system, college, the FDA is a scam because it costs $2 billion to get a drug through the FDA, and most of those drugs don't even really work. So let people decide what they're gonna take, and with the help of doctors. But the FDA is a scam. I kind of think the Constitution's a scam because every day it seems like the government, whether it's Congress or the executive branch or even the judicial branch, is doing things against the Constitution. I take it back, not the judicial branch, but every day. Let me ask you a question. Do you know when the last legally declared war was? So war is it's very spelled out in the Constitution when the United States is allowed to declare war. So we've been in so many wars: Iraq, Afghanistan, Vietnam, Korea, and on and on and on. The last legal war the United States was in was World War II. And you can look it up in the Constitution why that's the case, but I sort of think no one pays attention to the Constitution anymore. So we should just throw it out. And the whole idea, what does the president and the Congress do now? The Congress is supposed to make laws, the president is supposed to enforce them. Well, that is happening zero in the US government right now. The executive branch doesn't give a shit about Congress, and Congress passes laws that the executive branch no longer enforces. So the whole Constitution should be rewritten at this point. So I was going to talk about this great, awesome techniques for networking, which I'm going to start implementing in my own life on a systematic way. And I think my own life is going to improve incredibly. Instead, we're out of time. They shut me down after an hour. I've got like 1 or 2 minutes left. But I hope today what we covered was several economics lessons. What does unemployment mean? What does inflation mean? How the government makes money. We also covered what's going on in the virus data, how one should make decisions for virus. If you're a leader of a country, how should one make decisions when there are many complicated situations, like in this case, virus versus economy versus other diseases. So we talked about that. We talked about how to deal with uncertainty and techniques for dealing with uncertainty. We talked about what were the scams in society. Tomorrow, though, I really want to talk about these powerful, amazing networking techniques that I've used in the past, but I'm going to start using them more regularly. And it's fascinating. And we're going to talk about entrepreneurship and how you can come out of this even better than before this. And by the way, I'm scared too. Everybody's scared. It's okay to be scared, but thinking things out and thinking rationally and practicing to think rationally is a valuable thing one can do during this period, even if you're not very productive right now. So good luck. I'm going to share this on my IG stories. If you go to IG stories and click on live, I will share this, but I'm also starting to share this on YouTube. So 2 days ago, I already shared on YouTube. Yesterday's is about to be shared on YouTube. Jay, I'll send it to you. And today's I'll share on YouTube, hopefully by the end of the day today. So thanks very much, everybody. And I love doing this. I hope you like it. And see you tomorrow, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Good luck today. Don't worry so much. And see you tomorrow. Bye.